Good evening, students. Welcome to the class on al-qaeda and ISIS. So till last class, you were focusing on the biggest threat to the United States and the US role in the world, communism, right? And communism collapses, especially with the fall of the Berlin Wall, 1989. How do you remember 1989? What day exactly Berlin Wall fell? I'm going to teach you something which you will not forget. You know 9/11. Everybody knows. Reverse the date. 11/9. 11/9 is the fall of the Berlin Wall. 1989. 11/9, 1989. And with that, within a couple of years, the Soviet Union was dismembered into multiple countries. So you might think, okay, capitalism won, democracy won, authoritarian and communism is over, the biggest threat to America is over. That's what some scholars even thought. Francis Fukuyama, he even wrote a book called End of History. But a new form of threat came to the United States. And that was very unique with the idea of religion, because communism doesn't believe in religion. This was a religious fundamentalist terrorist groups. So these are non-state actors, because communism is a state. I'm talking about communism. The philosophy is followed by Soviet Union, which is a state. Whereas the al-qaeda and later ISIS will claim itself as a state, but it is form of radical terrorism, transnational terrorism. Write it down. Transnational terrorism is terrorism which is not just inside a country, but which crosses boundaries, international borders to come. Okay, now we're going to talk about al-qaeda. And al-qaeda is spelled a little differently by some scholars. I'm going to spell it al-qaeda. And al-qaeda means the base, the base. And you know, the most notorious leader of al-qaeda was bin Laden, right? And I'm going to go into the story, and also I'm going to give you the idea of the mixture of ideologies which made al-qaeda's ideology. The first one is Wahhabism. Wahhabism. This one was created by an 18th century religious person named Abdul Wahhab. Wahhabism is spelled like this. And Wahhab, his name, last name, Wahhab, is what, he's from Saudi Arabia. And he joined forces with the prince to capture and raid on other Muslims. His form of religion is fundamentalist, very puritanical, and he will go outside a tribe living and he will say, convert, convert, convert. And they are like, convert to what? We are already Muslims. He is asking them to convert to his form of Islam. And if they don't, he will use the alliance with the prince, the military, to conquer them, because he gives the religious right to conquer. And Abdul Wahhab's philosophy of Wahhabism is still used in Saudi Arabia, and they even export it to other countries. But if you ask the current crown prince, he disagrees. If you read his biography, he's like, oh no, we don't use Wahhabism at all. But Wahhabism is one of the ideologies of which mixed to form al-Qaeda's ideology. Now, why Wahhabism from Saudi Arabia? Bin Laden is from Saudi Arabia. Bin Laden was one of the sons of a rich billionaire, 17th son of more than 50 children this billionaire had. And how did he become a billionaire? Construction contracts. Especially he built many massive contract works, from roads to palaces, for the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So bin Laden had a childhood which is very similar with the wealthy Saudi families. He wasn't very radicalized. The word is radicalized or indoctrinated in his teenage. But later in the teenage, he got changed completely. So now I'm going to talk about the ideology, come back. Wahhabism is the one. Second one is called takfir. Takfir. Takfir is a form used by Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb. So I'm going to spell it. These names are very complicated, especially for an American audience. Whenever Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb is this guy. You could talk for a little while about him, but I'm going to give you a short story about him. And if you're interested further in this whole story, you could read one of the best books, Looming Tower, a Pulitzer Prize winning book by Lawrence Wright. And he talks about Sayyid Qutb in it. He even came to America, Sayyid Qutb. And in the mid 20th century, he did not like America. He thought the American women were very open culture and licentious, he thought. And he went back saying, I'm not coming here, and went back to his country, Egypt. And he wanted Egypt. Egypt was ruled at the time by Abdul Nasser. Nasser was very secular, not very religious man, not a religious Muslim. And Sayyid Qutb wants to transform Egypt into a theological Islamic state, and he wasn't allowed to do that. He was thrown in jail, and Nasser even offered him a cabinet level position if he stops his pontification and join forces with him. But Sayyid Qutb refused and died as a martyr. Martyr spelling, if you have never heard of it, M-A-R-T-Y-R. Martyr. You heard of martyrdom, is a very common word in Islamic terrorism, martyrdom. And so he died as a martyr. And before dying, he wrote a book called Milestones, one word, Milestones, which you could still find it in New York Public Library. And it's very famous among especially al-qaeda members who read that material. Not many of them can read, and many of them don't even read Quran. That's a fact. And just they follow blindly the warped versions of Islam. Anyway, there are some who have ability to debate on Islamic scholarship. Only the people in the top, but the ones in the bottom, not really. Foot soldiers are not. So Sayyid Qutb died, and Sayyid Qutb's ideology of this takfirism. This takfir means if I announce somebody as takfir, that means that apostate. They are not following the version of Islam we want them to. I want them to. And because of that, I could kill him. Because he's forgiven, forgave God. He's given up God. And so I could kill him. That's takfirism. And the next version is called Salafism, third ideology. Salafism. By the way, the takfir, even though its roots goes all the way to 7th century, it was recently in the 20th century used in the northern region of Africa when Muslims fought other Muslim groups to make other group as takfir so that they had the right to kill Muslims. Salafism, Salafi means going to the roots. They are talking about Sunni Muslims. There are two types of Muslim groups. The majority is called Sunnis. 85% of the world's Muslim population is Sunni. And the largest minority, out of the 15%, the largest minority is Shia. So the Sunni Muslims version of a small group of Sunni Muslims follow this Salafism, very tiny percentage, and they adapt that Salafism means going to the roots at the time of caliphates, the first three caliphates. After Prophet Muhammad died, there were three other leaders who took up leadership, Islamic leadership, and they were considered as caliphates, Caliphate 1, 2, 3. And Salafism, it means going to the roots and following your way of life based on those writings and of those times. So these are the three. So you have understood in the past about communism. I want you to understand the ideology of these Islamic al-Qaeda. Now, why was bin Laden upset at America? Simple question, right? Why did he consider America as an enemy? He didn't at the beginning. When he got converted to this version of Islam, he was 23 when about 1979. 1979, some of the important moments happened. Okay, one of them is, you probably learned, in Cold War, proxy wars, Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. Why did they invade? For strategic reasons, for the importance of the region, okay, closer to the ocean through that, warm ports, all this, and also to overthrow and put a puppet government which supports communism. Soviet Union invaded 1979 and they stayed till 1989, okay, but they were fought viciously by Mujahideen, that holy warriors, Muslim warriors, fought against this Russians, Soviets. Now, Bin Laden, when 1979, organized a group of volunteers and went to Afghanistan from Saudi Arabia to fight against the Soviet Union. He was raiding on the horses, and he think he could fight against Russian tanks and airplanes and helicopters and machine guns. But he believed that he could win based on waging a jihad. Jihad, for most of you would have heard of it from media, but in case you didn't know, jihad is the word, means in Islam, struggle. It's usually referring to inner struggle between the good and the bad, but it's also, in the outside context, jihad, waging a jihad, means to kill the infidels, non-believers, infidel means, right? And so Bin Laden organized a group, went and fought against the Soviet Union. And when Soviet Union was defeated, with the American support of money and weapons to the Mujahideens, right, holy warriors who were from the Pashtun region, a lot of them, and defeated. And because of economic reasons, also Soviet Union imploded, and Soviet Union retreated from 1989 from Afghanistan. Bin Laden thought he did it. He was able to defeat the Soviet Empire with his small band of soldiers. And he thought, what next? And many thought, well, we should wage a war against the state of Israel, because they are occupying our Muslim brothers. The reason they came in to fight in Afghanistan is to support the fellow Muslims, is the argument. Now they want to support other Muslim groups around the world, which is Palestinians struggling under the yoke of Israelis, so we're going to fight, they thought. But Bin Laden said, no, we're going to go after the big Satan, he called, against the United States. And the reason he gave, releasing a fatwa, I'll tell you what fatwa. Religious capacity clerics could only release fatwas. He's not a religious cleric, Bin Laden. He said America should retreat from supporting Israel. America should back off from the Gulf region and not meddle in politics. All these words, nobody knew Bin Laden at the time. Nobody even cared about what his views, political views, anything. But when he came back to Saudi Arabia, his country, another important event happened in 1990, right? 89, Soviet Union retreated from Afghanistan. 1990, Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, invaded Kuwait, a small country, oil-rich country, and annexed it, took over it. And America was worried that Saddam is now going to make a move against Saudi Arabia also. In fact, his military forces were, one of the tanks in satellite pictures shows crossing the border of Kuwait into Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia was worried, much worried, because Saddam forces, land forces, is quite large. And Saudi Arabia doesn't know which it can withstand. But Bin Laden offered the kingdom's rulers, why would they listen to him? Well, he's the billionaire who did construction jobs for the kingdom. So the son is saying, I could defeat them. I defeat Saddam. Just give me a chance with my forces. Yes, with his horses and men. And the kingdom is like, no, we're not going to give you the chance. And we're going to ask America to help us. And that made bin Laden very upset, especially not only he was rejected, that America is going to come into helping Saudi Arabia. And there's a problem for Saudi Arabia because if they ask America to come in and help them, Americans are considered as infidels, and that means non-believers. Non-believers means anyone who don't believe in their version of Islam, Sunni, especially their version of Islam. And so them coming in, and especially women who will be driving around, military soldiers, women are in the military, driving around in cars. At the time, Saudi Arabia did not allow women to drive. How is it going to go? So the king of Saudi Arabia asked permission from the religious clerics, and the religious clerics gave special permission in time of crisis. Yes, you can allow them. So they came in, America came in, and Gulf War, within few months, we kicked Saddam's back and kicked him out of Kuwait. Not only he didn't get a chance to invade Saudi Arabia, Norman Korskov, the general, was very capable, and you could talk about the movements, military movements, but we don't have time for that because they thought it's going to be a long, protracted war like the entrenched World War I, but he did the movements used in Battle of Kani and was able to kick Saddam Hussein out. Now, bin Laden now felt like disappointed, and he even moved to Sudan, the country Sudan. Okay. In 1993, he sent a terrorist act against the United States. In 1993, there was a huge truck bomb put under the Twin Towers. That's right. The Twin Towers, which was attacked in 9/11, the World Trade Center was bombed before 9/11. In 1993, a truck bomb went off, created a huge hole. Luckily, the building didn't collapse. Yes. And so now, staying in Sudan, he even gave a fatwa to kill Americans in Somalia. He wants to know what Americans were doing in Somalia. Americans went there to help humanitarian crisis because of famine. The food which was supplied by the international community was not being received properly to the people, poor people, because gang lords were taking over it and playing politics. So America went in there to make sure the grains are distributed properly. But when they went after a gang lord who was taking over the rice, 13 Americans were killed in the battle. It's called Battle of Mogadishu. And they were dragged on the streets. 2 helicopters, Black Hawks, were down. In fact, there's a famous movie called Black Hawk Down. You should watch it if you get a chance. And this was filmed and telecasted in America in CNN. American soldiers' bodies dragged on the streets and butchered. And so Americans felt like, why are we there? We are there for a humanitarian cause. We should get out. We got out of that. This was Bill Clinton's administration, right? And bin Laden wants to do further atrocious acts against America. So after that, he did 1998. 2 truck bombs went off in American embassies in Eastern Africa, Tanzania and Nigeria, Nairobi, the city, Kenya, and not Nigeria, Kenya and Tanzania in Nairobi. It killed a lot of American lives and took out many, even Muslims' lives on the streets. Then we know al-Qaeda is a problem. And Bill Clinton tried to put that as an important target and tried to get him, but he wasn't successful. Bin Laden was elusive and against the law enforcement. And then they did in 2000, just 2 years later, suicide bomb attack on USS Cole, which was a Navy ship, which was US Cole, which was doing getting a gasoline filled, and in the port of Yemen in the country, and suicide bombers came and exploded, and it was a huge hole. If you just Google U.S. coal, you could see the ship, the hole in that, and that's when America was started knowing, and there was CIA and others who were hell bent on getting him, but he was having problems. His funds and others were seized by the Saudi Arabia country. So he moved from Africa all the way to Afghanistan. And there was a leader named Mullah Omar. Yeah, there's a lot of names. Of course, every story has characters, names, and these are historical characters. Mullah Omar. He was just one-eyed guy who was the leader of Taliban. Have you heard of Taliban? Taliban. You could teach an entire class on Taliban, and there are many books written on Taliban, but here we are summarizing the whole classes about the Islamic terrorist threat America faced in just one class. So you can't go in details, but Mullah Omar created Sharia law. Sharia law, you probably heard of it. Sharia law, which is based on Islamic scholarly law. Sharia law is the most puritanical law. It's worse than al-qaeda in the way their ideology, Taliban's ideology is. And Taliban oppressed and subjugated women. Al-Qaeda doesn't subjugate women. That's like one of the differences. And Taliban, if you read the books, you will see that they will kill people. So if somebody killed my brother, say, then I will personally get a chance to shoot that guy who killed my brother. It's like a vigilante justice in front of a stadium, football stadium full of people, and shoot him. I don't want to go into the details. So this is how they're eye for an eye. This is like Hammurabi codes, you could say. But music cannot be used. No television. You got to grow a long beard. And because they're going to the roots of how Islam was in 7th century and the way of life. And so Taliban was very oppressive, and Mullah Omar was the leader, and bin Laden made a tie with them and started training people with the soldierly nature and combat training, everything. And he recruited few men for a big plot, which many of the people even right below him didn't know what was going on. And his right-hand man know. His right-hand man is from Egypt, Ayman al-Zawahiri. He was a doctor. He has his own story of being tortured by the Egyptians, escaped. And Ayman al-Zawahiri, the name on the top. Why would you need to know this guy's name? Now bin Laden is dead. He is the leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri. Anyway, bin Laden made one guy named Muhammad Atta. You know how to spell Muhammad. Atta. As the leader of the 9/11. And in Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, they call him KSM as the mastermind of 9/11. And Muhammad Atta, young men with engineering degree from Saudi Arabia. Most of the 9/11 terrorists came from Saudi Arabia. And these guys orchestrated to hijack airplanes. So they came in student visa, most of them, and they learned flying in flying schools, and they did not learn even landing. That itself should have given a red flag, but people who taught them didn't know. And these guys learned to maneuver the planes and decided on a date to orchestrate an attack on the United States by hijacking the airplanes. So when the first plane went into the tower, the Twin Towers, one tower, they thought it's an accident. President Bush was in Florida teaching kids, and he felt, when he was informed, he was continuing to teach because it could have been a plane by accident went into a tower. And then bin Laden was in Afghanistan, asked people to turn on the TV, his people, and they're like, oh, this happened. And he's like, wait, another one is coming. He knows. And the second plane entered the tower next to the first one. And that's when people in America and others, this is not an accident. This is a deliberate attack. And a third plane went to Pentagon in DC. Pentagon is the military wing, right, where all the operations and strategy is practiced. Different secretary offices there, and it went into the front entrance, hit, and so that was a third plane. The fourth one was flying towards DC, and it was brought down in Pennsylvania. There were fighter jets on the side, and some of the pilots themselves were thinking it was unarmed. The fighter jets should crash the fighter jet into the plane to bring it down if it's necessary. But the people in the airplane brought down, with the struggle with the terrorist, the plane down and collapsed. It could have gone to White House or to the building of Congress. Now, what their goal was to bring, as bin Laden said, America to its knees by attacking America's economic might, the Twin Towers. Pentagon, the military might, their symbol. America's might is not in just symbols, okay? But for him, it's a symbolic victory to attack that, to attack the military and the political wing of either White House or Congress, and that didn't happen. So when they executed this, that's when 9/11 happened, that the country decided to find the guys. But the people in the CIA immediately knew that this was bin Laden who orchestrated it and wanted to go after him, which is in Afghanistan. But Bush administration took the country. Yes, it started to bomb Afghanistan training camps of bin Laden, but also it went into Iraq using the country's public opinion. Big support. More than 90% of Americans supported President Bush after 9/11, even though he didn't win the election. The Supreme Court gave it to him through not counting the votes in Florida, because Al Gore won the popular vote, and he would have won the Electoral College too if Florida would have gone to his column. But Bush support overnight switched behind him, the country's support, because of the lives lost, and America was under attack. Now, Bush administration, let's not talk about Iraq war because that it's a topic on its whole for Iraq war, but let's focus on bin Laden, and I will come to Iraq when I talk about ISIS. And so America went into Afghanistan, and for American military might to take a country is not hard. Even when in Iraq war, it was swift to defeat military forces. In conventional way, we had the mightiest military. But to continuously subjugate the spirit of guerrilla warriors. Guerrilla warriors means they are warriors who are not going to engage you directly. They will hit you and run, right? So there was guerrilla forces and insurgents fighting against the American forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. So America's fight started then. It's still going on. It's right now. Almost 2 decades of war. This is the longest fighting war in American history. If I may quote the Sun Tzu, The Art of War, very famous scholar, Chinese scholar, more than 2,000 years ago. No country benefits from a protracted war, but we are fighting a protracted war, okay? Because to win the hearts and minds campaign, and to make sure that the country doesn't become a base for terrorists so that they could attack the United States. Now, we started a hunt for bin Laden. And bin Laden, for a while, was in Tora Bora Mountains. But he escaped from Tora Bora and disappeared. And we couldn't find where he was. And Bush administration 8 years was over. President Obama came into office. And President Obama had some information that he might be in Pakistan. This was a question asked to President Obama when he was candidate for office, that if bin Laden was in Pakistan, Pakistan is one of the allies, right? And will President Obama, or future President Obama, will go into Pakistan? And he said yes. But he was mocked by Hillary Clinton, who ran against him, that he would enter a country without the permission of an ally. That's exactly the scenario happened later. When he was president, he was informed that he could be there. And a place called Abbottabad. Abbottabad is where Pakistan's retired, highly big military officers live. And Pakistan's strongest and the biggest military government institution is the military. And Abbottabad compound, there was a man living, and he's pacing. Every day he's walking. So American satellites were trying to see the man, but the pacer, they called him a pacer, P-A-C-E-R. He put a screen right above him. He knows. And so electronic surveillance to hack through his computer at his home or internet or telephone, no electronics was used. He was very cautious to know America's capability in signal intelligence. So we don't know who this guy is. And the America sent even a doctor, a spy, to go and pretending to take samples or give shots for polio and get a sample of DNA. You might ask, why didn't they get a DNA sample from the garbage they put out from a house? That house, bin Laden was burning the garbage inside his compound. So you weren't able to even get a DNA. So already suspicious, but we don't know. We had to know for sure it's bin Laden if you're going to invade an ally, so-and-so ally, right? And this guy didn't even give a sample, or came to give a sample. There were women, children in the house along with him. So we don't know for sure who it is. And based on large amount of data, a team was arranged and who studied this, and they were able to predict only 50% chance that could be bin Laden. And the president went or asked for another red team analysis. It's the details which you don't need to know in detail. Red team is you bring a team from outside so that you won't have the team which is analyzing this for a long time will usually tend to have a bias. So to remove the bias, you bring a team from outside, red team. They looked at it and they said also 50-50 chance. So President Obama now had to take a chance if he wants to go in and send soldiers. And so he asked around the national security team meeting and all the military officials, Secretary of State, Attorney General, Vice President, and him. Everyone, including Vice President Biden, current nominee, said he wouldn't go in because it's not sure. The sources are only 50-50. He asked Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State. She said yes. She's the only one who said. And she was the only cabinet level woman. She was the only woman in the national security meeting. President Obama, took a walk, and then he went and played golf next day, came back, and he said, go. And then operation started, Neptune Sphere, and we had to watch the movie Dark 030. It's Hollywoodized, but still some other parts are correct, that helicopters which were entering from Afghanistan, we are fighting in Afghanistan, so we have a military base in Afghanistan, so a couple of helicopters. You could talk about this whole operation in more detail. You could teach an entire class. There's a great book Peter Bergen wrote called Manhunt, if you want to read. It goes into the details of how the soldiers were training, because you have to land the helicopter in a small compound inside and narrow space, and you have to go into a country without the detecting radars of the country detecting it. And so it's a lot of risk involved. So the soldiers have to land and go into the home. So these are Navy SEALs, highly trained already, but have to special training because it's a warm weather. So they built the same compound model and trained in Carolina. Then they know that Pakistan is a warm weather, so they built it again in Nevada and trained it. And now when the operation was go, these helicopters specially designed to deflect radar signals. So radar, say if I'm a radar, I will be constantly sending signals, and if I hit a target, moving target like a helicopter or airplane, it'll come back and tell me there's a target coming. But if this is helicopters designed to divert the signals, so it won't get to the Pakistanis as some helicopters are coming, specially designed. And then also they also had Chinook helicopters because the fuel capacity of these helicopters are not so much. They're pushing the limits. And the Chinook helicopters are, have you seen like two rotors, front and back? Those are huge ones, was also backup for these helicopters in need of fueling to come back. So these helicopters went in. One of the helicopter, when it's dropping the soldiers, because of warm weather, you drop because the flotation won't happen. Hovering is not easy, especially in the closer to the earth. Already the helicopters are napping the earth. Napping means like sleeping closer to the earth so that the radars won't detect. And most of the Pakistani radars were also focused towards India because they are afraid of India invading them, so not towards the Afghanistan side. So they went in, and when they're dropping in, the helicopter tail hit the wall of the house compound, and now that helicopter can be used. Still, the pilot was highly capable pilots, managed to land it without crashing, and the soldiers got off and started doing their job, trained to do. They shot at anyone who's on the path. The whole thing is watched in the national security team live by President Obama and the team. And the country did not know. Pakistani did not know. And so when they went in, climbing the floors up to the top, and there was a woman who came to the door, and the first Navy SEAL who entered just hugged her and jumped along with her. Why? Because if she had bombs strapped to her and explodes it to stop these people from coming in, this Navy SEAL's mission is to make sure she's moved out of the way, and if she explodes it, he will die with her. The next guy coming in will finish the target to capture bin Laden alive or dead. So the next guy comes in, sees bin Laden, shoots. Bin Laden's AK-47 was leaning on the wall. He shoots him, shots, and then takes a photograph, uploads it right away, and they looks at it, but it's with blood. It looks like bin Laden. They're not sure. And then they take the body, and meanwhile, other Navy SEALs are putting the bombs to completely detonate the helicopter because they do not want next day Pakistan coming in and identifying this helicopter is America's technology, to know the technology. And there was already crowd forming in around the house, and so they had a Urdu speaking, Pakistani language speaking American along with the Navy SEALs who went outside and said, "Oh, this is a military operation by Pakistan, stay away from it, stay away." And he was able to manage it. Meanwhile, these guys were taking troves of data, of computer information, CDs and things. He wasn't using any internet or anything. All this in and carrying their body, took off the helicopters. And by the time Pakistan started to know something is happening in the Abbottabad region, the helicopters were safe way out. But they were instructed if they were completely surrounded, they have to fight their way out. Navy SEALs have to. But they safely reach the Afghanistan American military base and lay the body down and collect DNA sample to be sent. But DNA sample testing takes time, whether to prove it is bin Laden. And President Obama asked to confirm the general who is doing the operation in Afghanistan, whether it is bin Laden. And height is one way to prove bin Laden is about 6'4", but the general did not have a tape to measure. So the general asked a military soldier who is about 6'4" to lie next to the dead body, and then he lied next to the dead body, and then they said, okay, Mr. President, yes, he's about 6'4". And then by the time the Pakistanis knew, President Obama walked and announced, I was watching TV at the time, on news or something, and he came on and announced that America has conducted an operation and killed bin Laden, 2011. Okay, and that immediately changed into students gathering around the White House and chanting all this USA, USA, and near the 9/11 area. Now, this might be a tentative victory in transnational terrorism, because there was another giant thing growing in Middle East that which I have to talk about, and that is ISIS. Now you might ask, so with the killing of bin Laden, did the organization die? It did not die. It weakened, certainly, because the organization still exists. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the physician, was the right hand, the second man in command, is the leader now. And he's old, he is running, hiding. But ISIS, I want to talk about. ISIS, write it down. ISIS is Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Islamic State. And you might think, oh, it's a state. Yes, they claim it's a state, or ISIL, they say. That means Islamic State in Iraq and Levant. Levant. You know how to spell Iraq and Syria, so Levant. This is the old form of saying the region. It's again the region. So the ISIS, there's a wonderful book. It's won a Pulitzer Prize. You should check it out. It's called Black Flags. Black Flags. And to make the story, this guy, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, I've done this name, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. This is a terrorist. He is a Jordanian, and he was in jail for small crimes in Jordan. And in Jordan, he become radicalized, met some of the important leaders of the Islamic fundamentalism who changed his way of seeing the world. And he started working out and reading regularly and praying 5 times, which he didn't do before, all this. And then he got out of jail because the leader of the country dies and his son becomes the leader, and he signs a release order for short-term imprisonment people. Somehow his name, Zarqawi's name, ends up in it. He gets out of Jordan, never goes back. He meets bin Laden when bin Laden was alive in Afghanistan, and he asks for him to have a branch of al-Qaeda, as if he's getting a McDonald's franchise, in Iraq. And bin Laden gives his blessing and goes Zarqawi and starts it. Zarqawi is a crazy nut, is to say simple, to very simplification. He likes to create bombs and terrorize people. And bin Laden's goal was against America, not against Muslims. But Zarqawi will even plant a bomb in a Shia Muslim wedding, because ISIS is Sunni Muslim. Remember, I said the difference. And will not hesitate, Zarqawi will not hesitate to kill even other Muslims who don't have his version of Islam. And when Iraq was invaded by American forces, there was a general, Billy McChrystal. McChrystal will go on night rides with this against terrorists and to find them, hunt them. And his story itself is like very interesting. This man runs miles and miles with less number of sleep. He works all the time, and he's like the quintessential American warrior, macho, and smart as well. And he one time raids into a home in one of his night raids and climbs up the homes to the top floor, and suddenly a dark figure jumps out of the window into the street and runs. And they go on, not able to find the guy. They look at the computers and thinks that was Zarqawi. They missed him so narrowly. This guy was beheading reporters and making YouTube videos of that and putting it in YouTube, and he became not so notorious until America needed an enemy to point to all this deaths happening against American soldiers, against the guerrilla operations, IED explosions. IED means improvised explosive devices. So they send Colin Powell to UN to give a speech. And so they needed a face, and they talk about Zarqawi. Zarqawi himself wouldn't have known that he's that big a figure, that the United States top leadership is talking about Zarqawi. And after that, he got a lot of recruitment and money supplies and others, and he grew. So now the hunt for him became a much serious affair. And long story short, they were watching, having an eye, American forces, on a particular preacher, which Zarqawi meets once in a while. And as they were watching, this car comes in, gets out, Zarqawi meeting the preacher. They go into a building. American forces flies a big plane, drops a huge bomb on that entire building, and then American military forces were rushing to find him body. But before that, Iraqi forces go there, drag him out. He's still alive, put him in a stretcher and about to take. When American forces come, they take over from the Iraqis. Zarqawi was still trying to get out of the stretcher and run away, but American forces keep him down and took him from there. He died on the way to the hospital. Now, Zarqawi died, and that was as ISIS beginning. But there was another leader took over who became more menacing to the United States, because this guy, his name is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Yes, it's all hard names for Americans who are not familiar with these names. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. What's the big deal about this guy? He claims he's from the same community, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, same community called Quraysh community, as Prophet Muhammad. So what, you might say? It gives him legitimacy, Quraysh community, this leader, self-proclaimed from the community, 7th century, Prophet Muhammad's community, Quraysh community in Saudi Arabia. He comes from it. And this guy is Iraqi. And he has a doctorate in theology, Islamic theology. And so he is not dumb, not able to read, illiterate, or others like some of the foot soldiers. He could spew out Islamic scholarship. He was actually under the arrest during American invasion of Iraq, but they didn't know him so well, so they released him. Then he went and took up the power of mantle and leadership of ISIS. Now, what was ISIS' goal? Okay, ISIS' goal is to create an Islamic state in Iraq and Syria. And so America created a perfect vacuum by taking out Saddam Hussein. Anytime you create a vacuum, even in nature, the air will come from outside to fill it, right? So there will be, if you're taking someone who is in power, there will be power vacuum. Other powers will compete to take over that. And ISIS was fortunate for them because of removing Saddam Hussein. They were taking over. And what about in Syria? Syria, the civil war started with Assad, A-S-S-A-D, the leader Assad in power, and people started protesting against it, which started them torturing some of the protesters, and then it blew into a full-out civil war. And so this is a clear chaos thrives, any agents of violence thrives in this environment. And ISIS wanted to create an Islamic State and create a ummah. The end goal was to create ummah, a Muslim community. What they're talking about Muslim community is their version of Muslim community, not any other, like either minority Muslims are not respected or honored. They will be even killed as infidels unless they are willing to convert to their version of Islam. Many of the Yazidi groups where people were killed and women of the Yazidi groups in Iraq were used as sex slaves. So they wanted to create their version of community. The difference between al-Qaeda and the ISIS, there are many. Al-Qaeda did not try to conquer an area. These guys want to create an area. And so you might ask, oh, like a state, so the proper boundary and sovereignty. So did they send ambassadors to the UN? No, they did not send ambassadors. One of the reasons is they believe their rule is mandated by God, so they don't need to respect international organizations. However, they did, like a state, create benefits program, like a welfare program. So if you live under ISIS rule, they were giving monthly stipends, which you could use for food and fuel, and you could do capitalistic activities if you want. And where do they get their weapons? They get a lot of their weapons from black market, and most of the weapons also from American supplies. What? Yes, America supplying to Iraq soldiers after the Saddam Hussein's collapse, to Iraq soldiers, which we were trying to create a country, functioning country. So these soldiers, when they were defeated, their armory was taken over by ISIS. They will take over many of American weapons supplied to the Iraqi forces who are fighting against the ISIS. And anytime they conquer a new territory, they will take over the bank and they will take money from the bank. They also did extortion, kidnapping through that. And most important, their revenue was for a long time through oil. And they were making about $1 million a day, even though they were selling those oil in black market. So there are many sources of revenue. Now you might ask, where do the soldiers fighting for ISIS come from? From all over the world. Most of them are, highest percentage of them came from Northern African region, but from Australia to America to England. It's not just Muslim soldiers from Muslim countries, but also Western countries, even Caucasians were in fighting with ISIS. Now, why would they want to fight with ISIS, you might think? And Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader, he claimed he is the caliphate. Caliphate is both a political and military leader, religious leader. So after Prophet Muhammad, there were 3 caliphates, remember I told you? Like that, he's the leader. If he is the leader, and if you believe in his version of Islam, you have to give your pledge your allegiance. Allegiance means loyalty. Allegiance to it. So that's called baya. So giving baya, it could be spelled as B-A-Y-A-H. Giving baya to the leader. So if I give a baya to that leader, then I have to live under his sovereignty, under his rule. So people will from other countries go to ISIS, to join ISIS, tear their foreign passports and live there as a soldier under him. And where do they go through? It's more detailed, but still you could go through Turkey and other means. And they were also recruiting young girls through internet, Muslim girls who are living in different countries, as if it's a promised land and they have to come. And when they come, many of these teenagers were used as pawns, as wives to these soldiers coming from different parts of the world, much older soldiers. And many of these girls who were captured under the ISIS, they wanted to come back, but they can't. And that struggles and things itself is a big story. If you're interested, you should check out Nadia Murad, who won the Nobel Prize because she was a captive as a sex slave. She was used, and this is a Yazidi woman, and she won a Nobel Prize because of not only she escaped from ISIS, but she started helping other girls coming out of it, started an organization. She lost her entire family in that cause, in the struggle. It's a beautiful book story, and you should check it out. ISIS goal, a long-term goal, is to create a community of Ummah around the world. They will spread, and they claimed they will defeat the West and they will break the cross, I'm quoting, break the cross and enslave the Western women. That was their arguments. And 2019, under President Trump, our American forces again was able to narrow down on al-Baghdadi, who tried to run through a tunnel, and American soldiers' dogs were on chase against him. He exploded himself and killed himself. And many times this ISIS forces doctrinate the photographs of soldiers in the battlefield as if smiling. They Photoshop them to show for recruitment, because if you die as a martyr fighting for God against infidels, you will go to heaven, and there are 71 virgins waiting for you. So that happiness and smile. Anyway, this is almost an hour, and it's enough material for you to think. Now ISIS have a new leader, okay, and but it's still in operation. The organization is again weakened like al-Qaeda, and these are the struggles that America faced from transnational terrorism, especially Islamic terrorism, since the fall of communism. Okay, we'll continue next class. We'll talk more, and also we're going to talk about cyber wars. Good luck.